Let's go over to our business leaders. May I request Mr. Sajjan Jindal, the chairman of the JSW Group, to ask a question?
Thank you for this opportunity, Madam Finance Minister. First of all, I must congratulate you and Prime Minister Modi's government on handling this pandemic phenomenally well. When many countries in the world are still struggling, I think India has done extremely well in achieving the goal. On the economic front, the fiscal stimulus that has been given to the vulnerable society, the extent of credit that has gone to MSME, and the falling interest rates, and unprecedented flow of foreign exchange that has made India the fourth largest foreign exchange reserves country after beating Russia, is some of the factors which has gone very strongly in your favor, and your leadership has really brought about all these changes. My question to you is that in this post-pandemic time, when the crude oil is going through the roof and it's already touched $70 and our dependence on crude oil is 88% of the import. So what kind of impact it will have on inflation, also the super cycle on commodities, which is affecting inflation. Would you continue to continue the benign interest rates regime, or will you think that the inflation is going to hurt us and you will start to think in terms of increasing the interest rates and reducing the growth rate of the country?
Yes, these are very critical issues given the context. The Petroleum Ministry is very keen on looking for alternative sources of crude supply. That's of course not going to affect the price, but at least the supply will be sustained, and without any disruption we should be able to get the crude. But even with that said, the price is something on which I've been open speaking about it, because what the central government collects, it is shared with the states, as much as this being one of those very serious issues on the basis of which people would raise questions on its impact on inflation itself. However, I think both center and states will have to talk about it. It cannot be any more competitive from the point of view you reduce or I reduce. I think overall we'll have to look at the consumer. And overall, again, not just the consumer, but also the ripple effect it can have on the economy itself. So that is one thing which I would be able to say, but whether that is going to have an immediate effect, I'll have to wait and see when the council meets, when the GST council meets. But the food and the food-related inflation, I think the group of ministers who is empowered to look at this essential services, essential goods, essential commodities is meeting very often and making sure that supply distortions because of any seasonal changes or because of crop patterns or because of output are all managed well in advance. And the classic example of the tomatoes, onions and potatoes is something which we have seen, that the prices rise, but as much as the rise in the same speed, it also comes down the moment the supply comes into the market. We are closely monitoring that so that that doesn't come into distorting any further. And overall on the commodities, even the core sector products, there is a lot of concern, whether it is copper, whether it is steel, and these are kind of essentials, especially when the economy is struggling to revive, and this is where the demand should be consistent and business planning should not be affected. I am sitting in consultation with a lot of people to see how best I can handle that, and therefore I think because RBI, the government, the empowered committee, all of us are repeatedly sitting and discussing, we should be able to come out with a good outcome.
May I request Mr. S.N. Subramaniam to ask his question?
Honorable Finance Minister, pleasure talking to you through the ET forum. First of all, credit to you, the Honorable Prime Minister and the entire government for handling the pandemic so very well. I think we have more or less come on top of it. Second, thanks for a fantastically blockbuster budget. I have two questions. Number one, many of the infrastructure projects have suffered due to one, the pandemic, and beyond that, the various time that it takes through either the dispute arbitration or arbitration process to settle. Can we apply our mind to see whether a better system can be found out to settle disputes across the table? Number two, how do we find an effective solution to see whether long gestation capex projects, especially in the infrastructure, can be financed through long gestation, cheaper funds, which can be made available either through LIC or EPF or such other sources which are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Subramaniam. On the disputes, I don't know if you're referring to states and center or commercial enterprises and states. Since 2019, I think there's been a lot of concern about how agreements will have to be respected and how and what kind of an impact they can have if any state sort of reneges on the agreed such agreements, and how are those kind of disputes going to be sorted out. There's a lot of engagement with the states and also with the corporates which have been affected. I don't know whether I can get into greater details of talking about it now, but that is an area in which we are working to make sure that commercial contracts, commercial agreements are all respected, and what is it that we can do in such situation for quick redressal through dispute mechanisms which can address such disputes as they arise. But as regards financing for long-term infrastructure building and also for projects which are long-term in nature, I think we have indicated more than one step, whether it is the forming of the DFI about which I mentioned in my speech. We are getting it to the Parliament at the earliest. We are also giving a space, legally, a legislated space for private sector also to come into funding long-term projects. We are engaged with a lot of sovereign funds. We are also talking to globally large pension funds to make sure that they can, because they have the patience to endure a long-term investment. They are deep pocket enough to also come and take up such investments. So whether through the NIIF or through the DFI, which I am now forming, we are making sure that we are already engaging with the sovereign funds and pension funds of the world to make sure that their interest, meaning that their commitment towards investing in India, is given all kinds of information so that the moment we are coming up with the DFI, we will have greater investments coming in. The NIIF, the National Investment Infrastructure Fund, is also on its own engaging with many of these global big funds to see how best they can be brought in for infrastructure. Tax benefits have been given for many of these sovereign funds. So I think that work will set the pace for infrastructure and project financing in India.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is from Vibha Padalkar, the MD and CEO of HDFC Life.
Honorable Madam Finance Minister, restarting our investment cycle and for India to reach the 5 trillion GDP aspiration is very, very critical. So in this context, what role do you see long-term money managers like insurers and pension companies playing in this journey, as well as what other reforms can we expect? For example, the way credit bureaus have helped NBFCs, banks, small finance banks really take off and grow. Can we have a repository of medical information, for example, perhaps piggybacking on Aadhaar? Another initiative could be, for example, portability between different retirement solutions, for example, from EPF to NPS and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Vibhaji. There's definitely a benefit which I recognize on behalf of the government. when engagements of such nature can happen with industry. And I will tell you, during COVID, the Indian venture capital funds people kept engaging with us, telling us specifically about ways in which the Indian money can come into investing in industry. Indian investors be drawn into investments for long-term financing. Indian venture capital to come in and play in building the economy. All this happened because the venture capital funding people were constantly engaging with us to say, you can do this, if not do that. And there was a lot of sharing of thoughts. I would invite you, Ms. Vibha Padalkar, to definitely give me your thoughts on how best we can do this data sharing, and also on the fungibility. It's a very important point on which there is some kind of a discussion happening in the government. So I honestly invite you to send me a paper if you can, or else we can fix a time and talk with a few interested people and responsible people in the government. Responsible in the sense those who are competent, given that area of activity for them to handle. So all of us can sit and talk about it with you and get some useful workable ideas.
Thank you. The last question is from Amit Agarwal of Amazon.
Thank you for the opportunity, Honorable Finance Minister. My question is, how do you envision the role of a global supply chain in realizing the goal of an Atmanirbhar Bharat? And what role do you see the industry play? Thank you.
Global supply chain, companies who are in that area have a lot to do. I honestly invite you to engage with government to understand where we are in the government on it and what is it that you can do for us. In fact, value chain is something which can make or break possible opportunities which exist. And you who have an exposure to the global value chain spread across several countries can actually tell us your experiences elsewhere, can tell us about the experience of government and commercial enterprise interface. Where are the best practices available? Where it is a win-win for everybody. Government on the one hand, the citizen on the other, and if anything, the stakeholder who is the company who has the value chain network in their command. So I would think engagement itself opens up opportunities, but greater engagement towards understanding each other's requirements is very required in a country like India, which is an emerging market, emerging out of, I would think, decades of slow growth, decades of a different framework where it wasn't possible for enterprise to speed up. And therefore, this engagement, I would think, is mutually beneficial and it can address a lot of misconceptions.
Right. Thank you, Finance Minister. I'll just put in a couple of questions since we have you with us. I'll just put in a couple of other questions. Because of the rising bond yields in the US, there is talk of some kind of because the fear of that the Biden stimulus might lead to inflation after some time. There is talk of a global, of a repetition of the taper tantrum of 2013. Because what happens when the Fed starts pulling back and so on. And according to a recent S&P report, India could be vulnerable or could be among the more countries which are more vulnerable to a taper tantrum. So what are your views on this? Has the government, because there has been some impact on markets already, and I think you wouldn't deny that during the pandemic, because although the situation is gloomy, the rise in the markets has created a general feeling of well-being, or is one of the bright spots during this rather, grim period. So what are your views on a taper tantrum and how seizes the government of this possibility, of this danger?
Well, first of all, I think we've learned a lot of lessons, not just us, the Reserve Bank has learned a lot of lessons post the 2013 taper tantrum, and also the way in which many things were left left loose rather than tie up and close the ends which were to be closed. And so when things were left rather unattended, it sort of coiled back and hit back. And those kind of obvious lessons which were there for everyone to see, I think we've had quite a few sittings and discussing with the RBI on it. And the way in which it appears now because there's a greater sync between RBI and the government, we are keeping a good watch, and I don't think India faces that risk of taper tantrum repeating now. We are carefully monitoring the situation and taking every such step, small, immediate, to make sure that the path is fairly clear for the stimulus to work and the revival to happen.
Right. And you referred to, I mean, there was one question was about inflation, the dangers of higher inflation and whether it could lead to higher interest rates in India. So in this context, I think we are now in the process of reviewing the 2 to 6% band, right? And we are supposed to complete this exercise by the end of this month. Is there any possibility of changing it, or are we sticking with the current range?
There's a lot of discussion. I don't think we've concluded it yet.
Right. So another deadline which is also coming up, I think, in a few days is the 1 year of the IBC, the suspension of the IBC. Where do we stand on that?
The suspension of the IBC comes to an end on the 25th of March.
That's right. We just
we'll have to see how the ground is. We've been working on it to see where we stand. We also want to make sure that injury or any kind of withdrawing of steps don't hurt the industry. Yet we need to get back to normalcy. All these factors are being discussed. The Parliament is in session also. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. And what about a framework for the fiscal deficit? Is there some, for the new glide path and so on? Where are we on that? I mean, are you likely to announce something soon, or?
I think we indicated somewhat in the budget. In fact, fairly clearly, we've indicated it, and this year or the coming year, we've given ourselves a reasonable expectation in terms of the fiscal deficit. I wasn't going to rush to get to the right number at the earliest, because the economy cannot be hurt even as it is reviving. So I think fairly elaborately the budget has narrated our intention on that.
And has the government started, identified the public sector banks which is, which could be privatized?
No, not yet.
And let me just, to ask a last question. In the General Atmanirbhar program, there are essentially two components of that. I mean, there's one is obviously the PLI, which is a production incentive scheme. But the government has also raised import tariffs on a very wide range of products, ranging from toys to textiles to a lot of other consumer goods, in order to incentivize domestic production. And there has been some talk. There was, in fact, I think Professor Arvind Panagaria was quoted in the papers this morning as saying that the process of liberalization has been reversed. And that old, goal of reaching ASEAN levels of tariff that is now in cold storage. So, do you see a kind of a creeping import substitution happening, and the dangers of that? Because we followed that for the first 50 years of our, independent existence.
No, actually, the import substitution that we are talking about and the Atmanirbhar that we are talking about is something on which all of us have spent a lot of time, particularly in the context of the Atmanirbhar announcements and the budget-related announcements, where you're actually extracting those tariff things that I've come up with, where I've raised the tariff for certain imports. We've spent a lot of time in the government sitting and thinking about it. The Atmanirbhar and the import substitution is not blindly saying, oh, stop every import. I can be Atmanirbhar, particularly when I produce equal global standard goods, which I can produce here, I am producing here, but if imports hurt me even as I do the production here, both in terms of competently selling for domestic market and also possibly exporting, I need to give them that kind of a support. So it's not going back to the socialist India where I don't want any imports coming in. I want imports to come in, particularly in the areas where they are intermediary goods, they are raw materials, they are something which is critical for my manufacturing to become competitive. So I've been very selective about the items on which I've raised the tariff. Essentially, if you look at it, they are all final consumer goods which are being produced in India. I have not raised the tariff on intermediary, or I have not raised on critical raw materials. And sometimes, when it is a question of seeing the inconsistency between the FTA regime and MFN, you see that many things which, if you raise here, come back to you through the FTA regime. Even these kinds of inconsistencies have been pointed out by the industry themselves to us. So rationalizing on the duty has had all these principles being before us and driving us to have that Atmanirbhar framework. So it is not Atmanirbhar of the socialist era.
So thank you, ma'am, for these exhaustive answers to all the questions and for gracing this rather virtual and rather unique version of the ET Awards. Look forward to seeing you physically at the next ET Awards, hopefully. But thank you so much on behalf of all of us at ET.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.